Hey everyone, it's AJ here from Sports Chaplaincy South Africa. Huge moment loading as we talk to Siviwe Shakes Soyizwapi, captain of our Blitzbox Sevens team. This is part one of a two-part series where Shakes shares personal details of his upbringing in rural Eastern Cape and how he came to play rugby despite being the son of a football coach of a very famous South African club. He also opens up about the pitfalls of bad decisions after signing his first pro contract and his path back to finding God again. If you're enjoying our work, please give us a punt on your socials and reach us on all major podcast apps. Search for the Call Up Podcast, where faith meets sport and life.
The Call Up Podcast, where faith meets sport and life. This is brought to you by Sports Chaplaincy South Africa.
So, I've got a first today. We've got a first on the Call Up Podcast. This is the first time that we have had a national team captain on the podcast. Now, okay, you're only the 10th person to feature, but nonetheless, this is a landmark moment for our podcast. We have had a vice captain. We had the men's Proteas field hockey captain, Keenan Horn, on a few months ago. And if you haven't checked that podcast out yet, I highly recommend it. Keenan just talks about how he kind of navigated the dual dream of being an Olympic hockey player, international hockey player, and pursuing his studies so that he could pursue a career in law. Brilliant testimony of God's goodness and God's faithfulness. But we have a national team captain. They seem to make them in the Eastern Cape. And some of you are thinking we've got Sia on, but no, we've got Shakes, the captain of our Blitzbocker Sevens team. And what we want to do today is track your rugby story, track your faith story. And I think later on do something I think is really crucial, and that's talk about how your faith has helped you navigate some of the lean times and tough times that you've experienced more recently. But before we dive in, do that deep dive today, got to ask you a really important question. How on earth did you end up with the name Siviwe? Welcome to the podcast, by the way.
Thank you very much, Bruce. It's a massive honor for me to sit here today. And as you mentioned, I think there's really been individuals that have made a name for themselves in sports that have been in this position. So I don't take it lightly at all. For me, I'm from the Eastern Cape, and you would guess then that since my name is Siviwe, that I'm Xhosa. So in Xhosa, Siviwe means our prayers were heard. It actually means we were heard. And my parents were referring to the prayers that they had been praying to God for a boy. So I'm a boy amongst three sisters, and they were praying for a boy, and their prayers were answered.
Wow. And our prayers have been answered because we've been waiting a little while to get you on this podcast. So, but that's one of the beautiful things that, as a Pommy, living in South Africa for the last 14 years, I think one of the things I really love about many of our cultures here is just the significance behind the naming of children. There's something really beautiful, and actually that aligns with the scriptures. In the Hebrew scriptures, people are given names for a reason.
Yes, absolutely.
There's a real purpose behind those names. But just tell us a little bit more about your background growing up. I know from our conversations previously, pretty humble background, and your mother was a woman of faith. Just tell us a little bit more about life growing up in the Eastern Cape.
Yeah, a small town in Maclear, born in Mthatha, obviously because Maclear never really had a hospital to have mothers deliver their babies, so we had to travel about an hour to get to St. Mary's Hospital, where I was born. Grew up in Maclear. I went to Maclear Primary School, and it's a small farm town, close to roads. The other towns that are around there is Yugi, Elliot, Berkeley East, and maybe people will know Alwell North, which is very close to Bloemfontein. I think being there in primary school, you're not exposed to much. You don't have a lot of resources. You're quite content with that life at that level. And we had family close by in the villages that surround Maclear. My cousins lived in a village called Engolosi. My mom's homestead as well was pretty close, which was Mbandela. My dad as well, right next to Yugi, which was Kakala. So pretty much, as you said, humble beginnings, village life, small town boy. Luckily, we had like sports that I was exposed to pretty young. My dad was a football coach. He coached Jomo Cosmos when they were still based in Tata.
Did he really?
He did.
So that begs a big question, because does that explain why you've got the name Shake? Because that's a name definitely associated with soccer, right?
Absolutely. The name itself, it comes from the comic book Super Strikers. So the star player of the comic is Shakes, and when we used to travel, myself and my dad would leave the girls at home, go on his football trips where he had games. I'd travel with him. He'll buy himself a newspaper. In that newspaper, there will be that comic book, which I became very fond of. I started reading it, and I fell in love with this main character called Shakes. And the boys who my dad coached, they caught on to it, and they started calling me Shakes because of that. And the comic is all about football and being in a football team. Yeah, I actually thought I'd play soccer at this stage.
So that leads itself really nicely into this question, because how on earth does a Gossa boy who lives in a rural part of the country, whose father is a soccer coach, and you get the nickname Shakes after a fictional cartoon character in a soccer cartoon book, end up playing rugby?
It was God's plan, I guess, because I also thought I'd end up in soccer. Everything I did, we traveled from Maclear to Mthatha, Maclear to East London. We'd go to KZN to play fixtures. We'd play in Matatial. We traveled a lot, and I was around a football team. I was around soccer players. My dad, all he watched was soccer. He tried to get me into it. But at my school, in Maclear Primary School, there was no soccer. And most of my time I spent in Maclear. He would get up, drive to Tsolo, which is nearby. He'd run his business. He had a taxi. And after school, then that means while he's working, I'm at school. After school, I need to do my extramurals. That's how they kept me out of trouble. I did my extramurals, ended up doing everything, but there was no football. So yeah, there was rugby at the school at the time, and I was basically playing rugby as an extramural activity. I didn't even think I'd play rugby. Never.
But football wasn't an option, so...
Football wasn't an option, and to actually carry on the rugby story is a good friend of mine. We were best friends. We grew up together in Maclear. His name is Umil. He actually lives in Cape Town as well. He was crazy about rugby. He had DSTV at his house, so we would go watch rugby at his house. That's all he watched as well. He followed rugby religiously. He knew all the Springboks from back in the days. He knew all the All Blacks from back in the days. So he actually taught me a lot about rugby itself. He played rugby Cravenwick under 13 when he was 11. He played Cravenwick under 13 when he was 12. He played Cravenwick under 13 when he was 13. 3 years in a row. And for me, I had this burning desire to to join him at some stage. I mean, we played in the same team, but I just never cracked it at a provincial level. And his dad saw that he was actually achieving so much in the game, and he wanted to send him to a boys' school and a rugby playing school, a school with a rugby culture. His dad lived in King Williamstown for work. So in King, where Dale College is, is where his dad got introduced to a rugby-loving man called Figile Blau. And Figile Blau, who was our coach at a stage as well, under 15, he gave Craven's dad, Akumile ended up being called Craven because he played Craven for so long. And he gave Craven's dad the application forms. Craven wanted to go to the boarding school, but he wanted to go with me. We were close, and we did everything together. So he wanted me to come with, and we couldn't afford it. So we knew we couldn't afford it. So I took the forms to my parents, though, and it happened.
So how did the door open at Dale?
My mom just said, God will make a way. We'll apply. We will apply at Dale, and God will make a way. Wow. She told me that she does not have the money or the finances to pay for my school fees.
And you said something really interesting right at the top here. You said, it was clearly part of God's plan. And I'm already getting a sense of, I think anybody listening to this is getting a sense of that. Yeah. Gorsa boy, rural area, football family, but the only extramural at your school is rugby. Then you've got this friend who's really gifted, really talented, and his father has aspirations for him, but you're kind of in his shadow. Yeah. And somehow, I guess miraculously, a door opens for you at Dale.
It did. I think the people that we meet and the people that we end up being the closest to, God always has a reason for that. And funny enough, Craven today is successful in his own right. He studied hard. He was incredibly clever. And he's an accountant today. That's what he wanted to do.
So he became an accountant, and you went on to become a professional rugby player. So at what point, obviously you've now got access to real opportunity, but you still have to take that opportunity. At what point did you go, hold on, I can maybe make a career out of this?
To be honest with you, in primary, as I said, I took it as an extramural activity. There was something burning inside of me to actually pursue it, or actually just enjoy it, enjoy the game of rugby, when Craven was just bringing something different to the small little town, where he would go on a Craven week to go and participate. That was massive for us. That was something that we never saw. We spend weekends, we spend weekdays, we spend holidays in Maclear. So for someone to travel and say, I am going to Port Elizabeth to play at the Craven Week, was something...
It's like going to another country.
It was just like going to another country. So, it was something that opened up my eyes. But going to Dale, listen, I think Dale was a rugby school, still is today, and sometimes I would think, that does this school even offer any classes or any form of education, because of how rugby crazy they were? And being there at boarding school, the bug absolutely bit me, and I fell in love with rugby at Dale College. I enjoyed playing. That's all I was doing, just being part of the atmosphere of the school, of the rivalries, of just being exposed to the game, throwing the ball around, exercising, and just being in a team environment. That was something that I was drawn towards. I still didn't make a provincial side at Dale, under 16, Grand Como level, nothing.
Wow.
I still had those aspirations while I was there, because now I'm even more in love with the game. But I'm still not cracking it. The one time that I actually think that made the difference was when I went for trials in my grade 11 year, and I didn't make the team again. So
This is really unusual, because generally speaking, if you're going to make it at a league high performance level, you're usually cracking it at provincial level, as a bare minimum.
Absolutely.
And you're telling me a very different story here.
That's true. I never cracked it from under 13 level, under 16.
So you got the passion, you got the opportunity. God's opened the door for you, but it's not happening.
It's there. But I guess there's different paths for different people. And as I sit here today, I think of another man of God that I know who's a good friend. His name is Lizo Popoka. And he never played rugby until he was 16 years old. And now he's actually a Springbok. He's a Springbok. He's now based in Cape Town. He plays for the Stormers, currently injured. But I know that pathways are different for each and every sports person and individual. Yeah. So...
Yeah, and it's really interesting. We had Ricky Steenkamp, now retired hurdler, and she never won her first race. I think she'll correct me if I'm wrong, until she was about 16.
Yeah.
And yet she had this burning passion to be a runner from like 6 or 7.
Yeah.
She didn't even win any significant race until she was like 16, 17, which is pretty remarkable, and then goes on to be national champion for a decade and national record holder, and
amazing,
won a World Cup event at the London Olympic Stadium, and it's crazy, isn't it? Like you say, and everybody has their own journey, their own story, and somebody can be ahead of you.
Yes, absolutely.
And years later, they have a different story from you.
Absolutely.
So you have to stay in your lane, don't you?
Yeah, no.
So, eventually you do turn pro. Now I'm trying to get this right, because the names change so often, like Eastern Kings, Southern Kings, Eastern Elephant. I get really confused, but you eventually finish school, turn pro. But I've got to ask you this question, because when we've chatted briefly, that was a real challenge for you, wasn't it? You were brought up in a home with Christian values, but I think when we get access to money, to a little bit of fame, and girls, right? There's greater temptation.
Yeah.
The 3 great idols are sex, money, and power, and celebrity.
Yes.
Is a form of power.
Power, yeah.
And those idols demand our lives, and what we give our lives to is ultimately what we become.
Yes.
You're brought up in a Christian home with Christian values, but then you arrive in this space. How did you handle that?
Just a pathway to give people insight and understanding was, eventually I got the call up from an injured player in the under 18 academy week team.
Okay.
So I eventually made the provincial side, playing at an academy level, or playing for the B team of the academy of the provincial side. So from there we played in KZN, a little town called Vryheid. We competed there. We actually did well. From there, there were a few scouts, and a lot of interest was sparked from getting that opportunity. Now all of a sudden, I have these options to be able to go to a EP Kings Academy. So I could have gone to Durban. I could have gone to Pretoria. My parents again intervened and were like, why don't I do something where I can study as well, be at the University of the Nelson Mandela University, and be close to home as well, within the Eastern Cape. So I went that route, and boom, you have a contract. Your life has changed dramatically.
Your profile's changed.
Your profile
has changed.
Now you have money of your own that needs to do a lot of things for other people, but you still have money of your own. So, and to answer your question, Port Elizabeth for me was the city of lights.
I mean, from where you've come from, it's a big city. I mean, if you're moving from Joburg or Durban or Cape Town, you go, this is a bit sleepy.
Absolutely. For me, as you said, it was like going to another country.
Yeah.
I mean, we only went to the beach at the end of the year in December, where we would really look forward to that as a family. And now I woke up and I saw the beach from my window, which was a drastic change in my life. And yeah, being part of the rugby academy and being in university, there's a lot of other students, female students. There's the temptation of girls, as you mentioned, and you have a contract. You mentioned money as well.
You got a bit more money than some of the other students, right?
Absolutely. And now all of a sudden, since there's this connection between the club and the school, you've got almost preferential treatment because you can't be in university the whole day. You have certain times that you come in, being part of the class, but still doing what you do. And the other students notice this, that it's almost a different life compared to them. Yes, you're a student, but it's so different. And I think I'll be honest with you. I just went with the flow at the time. I went with what friends did in the team. They enjoyed themselves. We worked hard. We really trained hard. We started our days at 5 o'clock in the gym, be at class at 8, train on the have a lecture in the morning and train in the afternoon, back to res to study. And then eventually I moved out of res. I was part of, now I lived at the academy house. And there it got worse because it's the freedom of being in your own space and just your teammates. So weekends we would go out with those clubs. I've never seen a club in my life. And we'd go out to clubs and see something different, loud music, lights, so many people. So to answer that question, I think at the time I went with the crowd and I just did what my teammates did. That's all I knew.
So you fitted in with the crowd.
I fitted in with the crowd.
Yeah. You weren't your own thermostat. You decided to be a thermometer and you'd go where the temperature was, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what happened? I mean, how did the prodigal get back home?
The foundation that was laid for myself back home by my parents and my mom, it's something that stuck with me. And even while you're going out, you have so much guilt. You feel so guilty just for going out, but you really want to experience it. You know what's right and what's wrong, and that rings in your head daily.
So you were brought up saying, taste and see that the Lord is good, but I say I haven't tasted this before, so I'm going to give it a go.
Absolutely. It's just like that constant fight of the flesh versus the spirit daily, and the flesh was winning, absolutely winning that fight.
Yeah.
I think I was there 2012, 2013, 2014. Again, things were going well. I got a call up early to play for the senior team, played Super Rugby at 21.
Wow.
And it just got worse. But for me, there was always like a void, or again, this feeling I had, which call it guilt or call it whatever it is, but I just knew that this is not the life I want to live.
Yeah. It's your conscience.
Yeah.
It's the Holy Spirit reminding you what's real.
Yes.
And what's true.
Yeah. And I had to make a decision for myself. That's when I was ignoring the Holy Spirit. And there came a time when I couldn't ignore that voice anymore. And I had to make a decision for myself. Remember that foundation that was laid was just a foundation. Yeah. And it was it was my mom's. I know she even says it today that this is what she wanted for her kids. But it wasn't something that we wanted for ourselves. It was still a decision that we would still have to make for ourselves.
Yeah. I guess you were in that stage where you were beginning to gain the whole world, but as Jesus said, forfeiting your soul.
Absolutely.
But you came back home. You surrendered.
Absolutely.
You gave it, and you waved the white flag and said, "That's it, I've had enough."
Yeah. My youth pastor from Maclear, his name's Stephen, still really close to me today. He invited me to a summer camp that year, 2014. And we always used to go while I was in primary as well. And I hadn't gone because I moved to the big city now. So I was spending time in different... I became a different person. I'm not coming back home as much. I'm not in the church as much as I used to be. So Pastor Stephen, for some weird reason, we never spoke that much that year, but he just rang me up and he said, the summer camp this year, same time of the year, at the end of the year, why don't you join us? And with the year that I had, I felt like God was just finding a way to reach out to me, and he used that channel.
Yeah.
At summer camp, 15th of December 2014, I gave my life to the Lord. I made the decision for myself.
15th of December.
15th of December.
I'm going to remember that day. So your 10th born again birthday was this year.
It's this year.
Yeah.
It's 10 years this year in December.
Yeah. See, God never lets go of his children, right?
Never.
Yeah.
Never. And as I said, the people that end up in your path, God uses those people.
Yeah.
Because Pastor Stephen was that person for me that got the prodigal back home.
Yeah. And he probably doesn't even know why he ended up inviting you, but that's just the way the Holy Spirit works, right?
Absolutely.
So praise God for that. Look, I want to jump on. I mean, that's a beautiful part of your story, and we wouldn't be sitting here right now.
Yeah.
So it's really important that we talked about that. And there'll be athletes and others who are maybe listening to this, and they know that deep down inside, actually the way they're living their lives, it's not right. It doesn't line up. Something inside them, whether it's the good seed of the gospel that was sown in younger years, or whether it's just their conscience.
Yeah.
We're all made in the image of God.
Yeah.
And something always tells us, this isn't what we're made for. This isn't really satisfying. And my prayer is that, maybe somebody who listens to this and is in that place.
Mine as well. Yeah.
Will know that actually there's a father calling them back home.
Absolutely.
The prodigal doesn't have to stay lost.
No, not at all.
And God's ready to throw a big party and say, hey, welcome back.
The Call Up Podcast, where faith meets sport and life. This is brought to you by Sports Chaplaincy South Africa.
The power of his dream brings you here. LIA Productions.